So the Bundesliga is back after the international break, and now it's time to look back at the third match day of the season. So we'll start with, as we usually do, the Friday game, which was a big one between Bayer Leverkusen and Eintracht Frankfurt. Obviously, coming into this, they were under a new reign now, under Kasper Hoymund, who joined over the international break, replacing Erik ten Hag. And so it was really a case of like, this is now the start of Leverkusen's season. The reign is over. So now they can actually work on gelling everyone together now. And they did win. They beat Frankfurt 3-1. It wasn't pretty by far. Most of the time, Leverkusen kind of had to sit back and defend, even before they went down to 10 men. And then they went down to 10 men and had to do it. And then they went down to 9 men as well and had to hunker down even more. The goal scorers were kind of like the only protagonists from their, or the only handful of protagonists left from their title-winning season. So Grimaldo scored twice, both from a free kick, and then Patrick Schick scored a penalty as well. I think it was kind of like the vintage Grimaldo we're kind of all used to. Granted, his first free kick, you could kind of make the argument, was it really a Mika Zeta own goal? If it was, then he still scored because the second one counted. But it was vintage Grimaldo with his dead ball ability and stuff, and especially with this new look Leverkusen side, you really got the feeling that like he's one of the elder players in the squad now, and like this was his kind of like moment to become a leader for the team. The head coach has said that potentially Grimaldo could be the vice captain behind Robert Andrich. Obviously, as I said, they went down to 9 men. Both of the red cards were quite stupid. They were both second yellows, especially the Eki Fernandez yellow as well, but there's said to be some confusion about whether he meant it. But yeah, they managed to, obviously this Leverkusen side is not really used to having to sit back and defend the whole time and grind out this win, but they managed to adapt to it quite well. And it got me thinking that the back three that Leverkusen played with, of Jarell Quansah, Loic Bade and Edmund Tapsoba, I think obviously you kind of have to go off of potential here because they don't have the same CV as what I'm about to say. But this back three has the potential to be better than the back three that won the league. Obviously, the back three that won the league was Tapsoba, Tar and Kosunu. But I think from like a individual point of view, Tapsoba is obviously still there. But his experience, he's now should be considered a leader of the back line. Jarell Quansah has loads of potential and is still quite young and is already playing very well for Leverkusen. And then you've got Loic Bade as well, who was kind of brought in to be the leader of this defence, and he's already started to show it after one game. And I think from an individual point of view, Bade is probably better than Tar as well. Because despite, like, there were times where you could see that the system was benefiting Tar. And when he's been out of the system, either with Germany or now with Bayern, you're not kind of as convinced about him anymore. But I think, obviously, to gain, like, to be like, okay, this current back three is better than the previous back three, they will have to win something to be able to compare them. But I think from a potential point of view, they can and very much will be better than them. Whether they can show it while at Leverkusen, though, is a completely different question. And then I think if you look around the rest of the team as well, things are starting to click and the vibes are up massively. I mean, Vasquez played well. As again, I still think he should be an alternative. Like, Nathan Tella should play where Vasquez played, or you play Poku. And then in Tella's place, you play Ben Seguir, Maza or Echeverri. But Tella played well. Schick, obviously, and Grimaldo. A big loss for Leverkusen is Ezequiel Palacios, who will be out for the rest of the year. The calendar year, not the season. But this will give the opportunity now for either Alex Garcia or Alex Garcia, because everyone else is suspended. But you give them the chance to step up and show his ability now. Axel Tape can also play in midfield. But for Frankfurt, this is a bit of a reality check. They've been on a high for the opening 2 games of the season with the way they've won those games. But because of their recent history of struggling against teams around them, it has just kind of been like a gut punch and them being like, okay, maybe we won't believe our own hype and we still need to work on this because they just weren't good enough. Ironically, like the Bayern Munich game in early October is the one where in recent season they've actually performed quite well in the Bayern Munich home game. And so that could potentially happen again in just under a month's time. But it is a reality check for them. They do need to start playing better against the teams around them. But yeah, things have started to go up for Frankfurt. Or this Frankfurt can now use this to, like, they're still a young team. They're still learning. But now they can use this to learn on and build upon to help them grow as a team and help Dino Topmüller grow as a head coach. So the next game is Borussia Dortmund versus Heidenheim. Dortmund won this 2-0. Again, Serhou Guirassy has staked his claim to be a top 5 striker in the world. I've said this repeatedly, and so I don't think there's really much to say. And if you want to make the argument, oh, he's not top 5, I think you can at least admit that he's severely underappreciated as a striker. Like a bit of a late bloomer, but he's carrying Dortmund basically. Not so much in this game because it was pretty easy going for them because Heidenheim, it's not looking good for them. But like it was classic Dortmund after this game where Maxi Bayer comes out and says, yeah, we could win the league. And then Niko Kovac comes out and says, we can't win the league, and gives a bit of a reality check. Because you want like a team to have this belief that they can challenge Bayern. And it's clearly there with the players. It's just everyone else around them is kind of telling them to lower it. But I mean, doing that then results in, we are always the bridesmaids, never the bride. And then you end up in a situation such as Mainz again. And then again, like there's other things going on with Dortmund as well, like Felix and Mecha. Like, just shut up and play football. I'm not going to go and say, politics doesn't belong in football, because it does. It's intrinsically interlinked. You even see it in German football in itself. But, like, when you're coming out with blatant shit, just shut up and play football. Because we all remember, like, the transphobic shit he posted, only to then have probably the worst season of his career. And, like, you put Dortmund through all that just to, whether that will come of anything, especially because Dortmund like post this anti-racism stuff, and then you have Mecha twerking for, who's basically a Nazi. But yeah, on to the next. Freiburg and Stuttgart. Freiburg have finally kick-started their season. They beat Stuttgart 3-1. The substitutions helped them. Julian Schuster brought on Igor Matanovic, Jerry Schernat. They all scored. Matanovic is obviously ex-Karlsruhe. So a bit one-upmanship there. But for Stuttgart, they're still quite a confusing side. Things are still yet to click for them. You can't put your finger on why. Obviously, the departures of Nick Woltemade and Enzo Mio don't help. But like you still have a wealth of talent at your disposal that it should be good enough to make a difference. I mean, Omadim Demirovic is finally getting a run as the main striker and is scoring because of it. I mean, he scored a nice back heel in this game. And then you've got Jamie Lieberling, Chris Furich, and then you've got the new signings as well. Like, granted, the new signings still need to, like, be integrated because they actually haven't. This was their first game for, like, El Canous and Bunani. But, like, the core of the team is still there. It's not like last summer where Valdemar Anton and Guirassy and Hiroki Ito were just ripped out of them. But the majority of the side is still there. You still have Angelo Stiller. You still have Jeff Chabot. You still have Maximilian Mittelstadt. I think changes are coming for Stuttgart. They play St. Pauli on Friday, and you really need to see them win this game now. And changes will obviously need to be made. Obviously, I have said, time to move on from Atakan Karazor. He's not good enough. So it's stuff like that. And it's just overall everyone else clicking, and then maybe they can finally kick on. Still stand by the fact that I think Stuttgart can not only finish top 4, but they can also win the Europa League. Leipzig won their second game under Ole Werner, beating Mainz 1-0. They continue to build, and again, this is, I think with teams that have done a lot of business or had a lot of incomings and outgoings, you can see that like everything still needs to click. And I think, you can see it with Hamburg, who we'll get to later. You can see it with Stuttgart, who have lost key people, brought key people in. You see it with Leverkusen, and you see it with Leipzig as well. Well, on the alternative, with teams that didn't do as much business, such as Bayern and Frankfurt. Obviously, Frankfurt lost, but in the early stages, they've clicked because they already minimal business was done, and it was only 1 or 2 players added here or there. So Leipzig is obviously still trying to integrate everyone. They were quite active in the latter stages of the transfer window, so it's just really bringing everyone up to speed. Johan Bakayoko did score his first goal for Leipzig, and yet obviously Leipzig now don't have the luxury of not playing Champions League football, so it means they do have to, they get a rest now instead of playing in midweek, so it allows them to continue working and building. Mainz, on the other hand, obviously after their great season last season, they've started off this year quite slowly. And what's naturally happened with the departure of Jonathan Burkhardt is that they're struggling to create an attack. Obviously now some Vipers there. They have William Burving, Benedikt Hollerbach is now injured. You've got Jason Lee, Paul Nabel. I think he's called Paul Norden as well. They haven't yet to be able to create anything. So yeah, it's a bit of a reality check for Mainz. Obviously, they do start their Conference League, not this week, but next week. And that will probably affect them even more, because is their squad good enough to compete on 2-3 fronts? As the early signs of the season have shown, maybe not. Hoffenheim beat Union Berlin 4-2. Hoffenheim started quite strongly under Christian Ilse. Obviously, they had a horrible season last year. And as I've said, and I banged this drum repeatedly, it's the arrivals of the loanees that have massively helped them. And Visnik Aslani is one of them. Or in 3 games, Aslani has 3 goals and 1 assist. So he's really took the step up already. So is Tim Lemperler as well, in fact. They both started off very well at Hoffenheim. They both managed to transition from the Zweite Bundesliga to the Bundesliga quite easily. And yeah, along with the likes of Andrej Kramaric, just stalwart of the side, and a bunch of other people, they are starting to mould into an okay side. And then with Union Berlin, it's back to reality now. The reality of, the win against Stuttgart was a bit of a fluke. But now, okay, we're lower mid-table relegation candidate. Speaking of a team that's surprised so far is Cologne. They've started the season very strongly. But the question is, how good can they actually be, and is it just overperforming? I mean, they beat Mainz on the opening day with a late winner. They beat Freiburg quite comfortably, and then they needed a late equaliser to draw 3-3 with Wolfsburg. And you'll probably accuse me of being biased, think they're overperforming at the moment. And if you look at the teams they've played against, apart from maybe Freiburg, it's not exactly difficult. They haven't actually truly been challenged. That should be changed against Leipzig. And then you get the reality of how good are Cologne actually, because granted they have played nice football under Lucas Kwasniok, and obviously the new signings have adapted quite well already. But again, who they've played isn't the most interesting. Obviously, this game had 3 major stoppages. There was massive rain, then there was flares, which caused a delay, and then there was a lengthy VAR check as well. And Wolfsburg thought they had the perfect way to cap off their 80th anniversary celebration party when Maximilian Arnold, the top appearance maker, scored the winner. But then Cologne equalised. Or in the late Saturday game, it was Bayern against Hamburg. Standard win for Bayern, 5-0. Hamburg have a horrific form against Bayern, not only home, but just in general. Granted, they've been away for 7 years, but they haven't won in Munich since 2007, and then they haven't won against Bayern since 2009. So even then, there's nearly 10 years when they were in the Bundesliga that they failed to win, and it just continued here. It's warning signs are kind of flashing for Hamburg. Obviously, they have quite a youthful defence, and so everyone's kind of still adapting and getting used to playing in the Bundesliga. But like, the warning signs are there, and they're flashing quite loudly that, they're not good enough defensively. You saw it today on Saturday. You saw it against St. Pauli as well. The win against Borussia Mönchengladbach, or the draw against Borussia Mönchengladbach, is now irrelevant because of how crap Gladbach are. So you're kind of really getting the warning signs of, okay, things need to change now if we want to make an effort at staying up front. It's staying up. But granted as well, like, their opening games have kind of been emotion filled. You got the return home, or the return to the Bundesliga. Then you got the return home of the Bundesliga at home against your city rivals, and then you've got Bayern Munich in your third game. So they're all kind of like emotionally filled games. And now, like, reality and normality can settle in, and you get into the grind now of the Bundesliga when you play against Heidenheim in your next game. But this is where you need Yusuf Poulsen to step up and be like, okay, like, this is how we do things in the Bundesliga. It does help that they have Fabio Vieira now, who can help in creating stuff, but against Bayern he did nothing. But that's not entirely slight on him because of how dominant Bayern were. Obviously for Bayern now, it will be how can they handle playing two games at once. On Wednesday they play Chelsea in the Champions League, which will, now you determine, okay, how will this thin Bayern squad deal with playing two games every couple of weeks? And this is now where the real season kicks in. When the Champions League starts, this is where the grind begins. And so it will be depending how Bayern can deal with it. On Sunday, St. Pauli came from 1-0 down to beat Augsburg 2-1. Hotunji with another goal. So that's 3 goals in 3 games. So he's starting quite strongly. And again, I've said my piece about Hotunji previously. Daniel Sinani as well scored the free kick to make it 2-1. And again, this has just seen St. Pauli, like the evolution that St. Pauli have needed. They played a certain more pragmatic style of play last season, and now they're kind of blossoming. And you're seeing head coach Alexander Blessing actually wanted to play. Finally, Borussia Mönchengladbach against Werder Bremen. Bremen won this 4-0, and it was a statement performance from Bremen. It put the doubters of Horst Steffen kind of to bed, because things were really beginning to click here. The late transfers were helping. Samuel Mbangula, who wasn't a late transfer, but he was like the only major arrival, he stepped up in this game. Obviously, it's one game, so you can't be like, oh, it's all paid off. It's a step in the right direction. It will give this Bremen team, who have objectively a lot of youngsters in it, a lot of confidence going forward. They're like, okay, we're able to beat this team quite convincingly, so now we can use this going forward. It puts a caveat on this because it's Borussia Mönchengladbach, and now I've said this before and I'll say it again, it's time to go. Seoane needs to be sacked. He's not good enough. The team hasn't improved at all. In fact, things have gotten worse, especially defensively. Like when Seoane first came to German football, he plays this really gung-ho, suicidal football, but at least you would lose 5-4. This is Gladbach losing 4-0 because not only can they not defend, but they cannot score either. And their over-reliance on Tim Klein is rather worrying. They've gone 5 games without scoring a goal, which is over 450 minutes of football. And then things are worse by the fact they've also gone 10 games without a win. The last win, ironically, was against RB Leipzig back in March, and that resulted in the sacking of Marco Rose. And so now the next 2 games are against Leverkusen and Frankfurt, and it's really like you kind of have to get to the October international break and then be like, okay, Seoane. Like, the next games are not easy games, and you're just going to bring in someone, and they're not going to have the time to build this, like, how they want to, at least some skeleton of how they want to play. They're going to be thrown in straight at the deep end against difficult teams. And then you're not going to see, obviously, you're not going to get the new manager bounce, and things are not going to be obviously improving. So you want to get to the October international break, go, okay, goodbye, bring in someone, and then go from there. It's been obvious for a while that Seoane isn't good enough. I think that brief spell in the early stage of last season really saved his job, because since he's arrived, it hasn't been good enough. And the fact that he's got to this point as Gladbach head coach, you can go and play the lottery now and you'll win. Because why the club has decided to stand firm with him when there has been no development or improvement is beyond me. Even the end of last season should have not justified him staying. But the problem is, you sack Seoane, who's going to come in? There's not a lot of good enough managers available to replace it. But there is one man, and that man is Marco Rosa. Granted, and I'll go into this later this week, Rosa is the reason Gladbach are in this situation because of this massive butterfly effect. But he needs a revival of his career. Gladbach need a revival. So you kind of go, okay, let's forget what happened last time and try and we will rebuild each other. Rosa's stock in career hasn't been the same since he was at Gladbach. Gladbach haven't been the same since Rosa left. So it's just, you kind of be like, okay, let's try again. Because it worked the last time. Granted, you could be like, Gladbach had a very good squad then. But if he's done it once, surely he can do it twice. Because as things stand, the other managers available, apart from maybe Roger Schmidt, they're not good enough. Urs Fischer, Bo Svensson, Bruno Labbadia. These are people who are not going to improve Gladbach to the position that they want to be in. How long Seoane stays in charge is beyond me. It could be one game, it could be 1 month, it could be the rest of the season, because his contract expires at the end of the season. But what's clear is this has to end at some point. As in, this isn't going anywhere. Things are going poorly quickly, and something needs to be done about it. So the table after Matchday 3 now sees Bayern top, as usual, on 9 points. They're the only team with a 100% record now. Borussia Dortmund are now second on 7. Cologne and St. Pauli then make up the rest of the top 4, also on 7. And Frankfurt are in 5th on 6 points. The bottom 3 are Borussia Mönchengladbach, Hamburg and Heidenheim. Both Gladbach and Hamburg are the teams that yet to have scored a goal. And so Matchday 4 sees Stuttgart play St. Pauli, Augsburg, Mainz, Hamburg, Heidenheim, Hoffenheim play Bayern. Considering how Hoffenheim are playing and considering Bayern's Champions League exploits in midweek, it will be interesting to see how this plays out. Bremen play Freiburg, Leipzig play Cologne, and then on Sunday is kind of like the bigger day. Frankfurt play Union Berlin, Bayer Leverkusen play Borussia Mönchengladbach, so you have a bit of a Kleiner Rhine derby. Sacked Seoane, and then Borussia Dortmund play Wolfsburg to round out the match day. And then in the Champions League, it's Frankfurt, Bayern, Dortmund, Leverkusen. And so on Tuesday, Dortmund play Juventus. Wednesday sees Bayern Munich versus Chelsea. Then on Thursday, Bayer Leverkusen play Copenhagen in Denmark. And then Eintracht Frankfurt play Galatasaray. So that is it for this match day. Let me know what you think. If you think Seoane should be sacked, he should be. And what other takeaways you have from this match day.